Welcome to Perspectives in Mobile, the news podcast from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. Join us discussing the world of telecommunications, technology, and mobile innovations. From London, Dario Betti, MEF CEO.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Perspectives, the podcast from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, where we look at views on the market and what people think, how they got there. And this week, we talk about the mobile IoT market and much more. Because today, we are having Mike Bromwich, the CEO and founder of Stacuity, and Tim Dowling, the CCO and co-founder of Stacuity. Welcome to both of you.
Hi, Dario.
Great to have you, and thanks for joining me here virtually, but you're on different parts of the world, I understand. So we got Mike, you're in the Isle of Man?
Yeah, one of those 80,000 alcoholics clinging to a rock in the middle of the sea. Yeah.
And where are you, Tim, today?
I'm in the UK, just south of London. It's kind of early February when we're recording this, isn't it? So it's just starting to get a little bit lighter and brighter outside after what's felt like quite a long, kind of dark winter in the UK. So yeah, good to be here.
Here we go. Well, both of you, I think put together, you got about 50 years of experience in the mobile market. So I'm afraid that the next 30 minutes might not be enough, but we're definitely going to start. So we will go potentially through some of the things you've done. But right now, I'd like to ask you something almost not related necessarily to mobile, but to your level of sanity or insanity. So you started a company, starting with Mike first in 2020, pandemic, issues, no flying, eventually banking crisis, interest rates, tech crunch, and you're still going strong. But how did you come up with that idea of doing that? Why would you start something like that?
In some ways, it actually worked out really well. I mean, obviously, it was a very challenging time through the pandemic, but as a techie who's locked down, I mean, techies and developers love to be locked down. They love to be in their room in front of their computer creating things. And so from a timing perspective, the whole business was kicked off initially as a bit of a lockdown project. I came out of a previous role where my time was very stretched between commercial and technical work. But I'm a geek at heart. I'm a geek and proud. So when I moved on from that business end of 2019, it was a great opportunity. I was stuck at home in front of my computer. I could get back to my roots and do coding and build something in a way that, if the world had been in a normal place, would have been a lot more challenging in a way.
Oh, wow. So it did help you. And Tim, how did you come up and join in on this idea?
Well, Mike and I had got to know each other before the pandemic, so we'd worked together in a previous business, became kind of friends, and also had a few conversations where there was a meeting of minds really about some of the challenges in the industry, some of the opportunities, and then as everyone I think did, as kind of COVID started to kind of lock us down, we kind of moved some of those conversations onto Zoom, sometimes on a Friday night over a beer. And it naturally just evolved. So as Mike was starting to kind of build the very earliest stages of what became our MVP, we were also exploring just the potential for trying to create a new type of business that could give more power to the developers, more power to the end users.
Okay, well, we're going to be talking about that, the power and what Stacuity does shortly. Now, let me go what should be my usual opening for this one, which is let's talk about your perspectives and about this specific market. Because the mobile IoT market, for good or bad, is always being talked about. And there's one of those topics where we have a lot of very different views. So let's start with yours. And I'll ask Mike first. Where is mobile IoT market going?
I think that historically, the IoT use cases have ended up being built on top of a network which was primarily initially designed for consumers. It was designed to provide a service. But every IoT use case is different. The requirements of an oil tank level monitor are very different from a security camera, very difficult from a heart monitor. They're very different sets of requirements, all layered on top of a very standard network. And so our view is that there's a need for customers to be able to differentiate and configure the connectivity to meet their needs. So it's about transforming the network from a service to being a platform, so that it can be consumed, it can be built on top of, rather than just plugged into. I think that's my summary.
And Tim, what's your view?
I think let's kind of put IoT in quotation marks for starters, because we've had a lot of conversations internally as a team, which we see kind of played out in the wider market as well, about to what extent IoT is actually a helpful term to describe what we're doing. Because take one example, and this isn't just us, but this is kind of the evolution of the market. Where it's necessary and helpful, the internet doesn't need to be involved at all in terms of the transmission of data, between the sensors and the cloud. That can be managed over entirely, private, secure, software-defined networks like ours. So is IoT actually helpful? Because in some ways also I think the IoT label has become in the industry associated with some baggage which actually is negative and is a constraint on the potential of the future. So I think, maybe 10 years ago, a lot of investors got very excited looking at lots of hockey stick type charts of revenue growth and the growth in devices. And frankly, some of that hasn't materialized, has it, in terms of the revenues that the operators were expecting to generate, because a lot of the IoT use cases involve very small amounts of data. This is incredibly valuable, but I think we've all as an industry learned about some of the economics there. Smaller amounts of data, massive scale, and that demands then a different approach in terms of the platforms and the value chain to actually make it possible to manage all of those valuable services profitably. But also, as we look forward, and I think the MEF is kind of very active in this space as well, we just get really excited about the potential to use mobile data as a key resource for digital transformation. So, not thinking necessarily about IoT as a siloed, separate solution that's got a very specific purpose over here and is kind of managed discreetly from the enterprise's IT environment, but thinking of the solution as another part of the enterprise's IT, and delivering mobile connectivity as an IT service, much more agile, flexible, and again with the customer in self-serve control. So yeah, I think it's a really exciting time, actually. I think we might be at the point actually where kind of the IoT market is really going to mature.
Oh, fantastic! So we're looking at transformation, as Mike was saying. We need to look in different things, but we're looking at big growth. Both of them seems to be exciting time to be there. So, what exactly does Stacuity do? Why was something missing in the market there then?
Okay, well, I'll go with that first from a technical perspective. So, in my previous role, working within an operator, not a week went by without a customer or a prospect coming to and ask with a requirement, which I could see as a technologist was very valid, was very sensible. I could understand the ask, I could understand why they were asking for a particular service, but quite often we weren't able to meet those needs, and that's because, like I was referring to before, core networks are very much about providing a service. They're about centralization of control. Typically, you buy a core network from one of the big vendors. In lots of ways, it's pretty locked down. It's very highly optimized for quite a narrow set of use cases. But outside, elsewhere in the IT industry, innovators and developers are used to, for example, logging into, the example I always use is you log into AWS 2:00 in the morning, halfway through your pizza. You need to spin up some servers and some connectivity, create a VPC, and start paying for that on a commodity, a consumption basis. On the mobile side, if you ask operators to act in that way, their hands are just tied. They can't respond that quickly. Anything which is unusual or bespoke It's a project, it's a quote, it's months, it's tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds. It's not the same commercial dynamics. So, my mission, if you like, as I moved on from that business, was: is it possible to build a mobile core network from absolutely first principles, from the first line of code, but with a laser focus on innovators and developers being the customer. So every feature, everything we build, think about how would a developer want to consume this? How does this allow them to meet their business requirements easily, quickly, securely? And that's that's how the business came about, democratizing that control, putting putting developers and customers in fine grained control, but at the same time, protecting the network, protecting the operators, and in a way that fits into the wider mobile ecosystem.
Oh, fantastic. So democratizing, I like that. And getting that level of flexibility and access. And Tim, I look at you as a commercial side, not that Tim Mike wouldn't be, but what do you think that you're bringing to the world out there with Stacuity in terms of the commercial, in terms of the service layer?
Well, I think I'll start answering that by actually going back to kind of where we started the conversation as well, about kind of the origins of Stacuity and the kind of the meeting of minds that Mike and I had. Because, as you say, my background is kind of, marketing, commercial, proposition, type roles in MVNOs and operators. And in those roles, my job was always to look at what, was happening in the market, look at what customers needed, and then try and translate those needs into interesting features, propositions, new things that the company could do, get them delivered so that the company could grow and the customer would be happy. And in that process, very often, I found myself as an internal customer trying to represent, that need for change, frustrated by the inability of the company to respond. And that's the opportunity that, we're trying to address here, that the customers, regardless of their size, because we offer, our proposition is offered entirely as a service. You can, in effect, it sounds like a soundbite, but it's true. You can, in effect, run your own private slice of the global mobile ecosystem with just one SIM, using some of the innovations that Mike's created. So there's no big barrier to entry. There's no kind of long lead time. And that's what we're trying to do. It does come back to this point, democratization. Our philosophy is, if we can open up, the core network in a secure way, turn it into a platform so that people can innovate, configure mobile connectivity according to their particular use cases, kind of mass customization, if you like, everyone wins. Customer gets, a better solution that they're in more control of. They can align it with their security policies or whatever they want to do. The operator gets more and happier customers. And we sit in the middle. We have a good business because we're generating lots of usage of our platform, but we can also make a contribution to profitability because we're taking a lot of cost and effort out of the whole value chain. Because the capabilities that we talk about, as a platform, customers are self-serving. It's just we think it's not that we're not arrogant. We're ambitious. We're not arrogant. I don't think we're not kind of zooming ahead to the end point of the evolution of the industry. But I think we have the potential to make a really important contribution to just moving everything on, increasing flexibility, agility, and bringing some of those key benefits into mobile connectivity that's always been a bit of a black box.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mike, while you were talking and you were referring to the democratizations of the services out there, and I don't know if there is a direct link, but not being a techie myself, when I look at your CV and I spot that you founded and you just take 12 years at Parsonware, I see a parallel between the two. I can see how there was a similar approach in trying to streamline and create a service or a layer on top, which was easier potentially. Is there something that you learned that you took away from that experience, which is in Stacuity now? Is there a link between these two different companies?
But definitely is, Dario. Yeah, I mean, Stacuity wouldn't have come about without partitionware. And the reason for that is the partitionware business, which was founded in 2008, sort of the concept of that business was trying to not necessarily about layering, it's about bringing two worlds together, the worlds of telco and the worlds of IT. Because back in 2008, it doesn't sound that long ago, but in industry terms it was, um, those two worlds spoke very different languages. The IT guy turns up with his laptop, the telco guy turns up with his soldering iron. They might as well one speaking French, one speaking German. Trying to get those things to communicate was very, very difficult. So that meant, as needs arose to be able to monetize the network in new ways or use it for the use cases, it was very difficult. So partitionware was about bringing those worlds together: the traditional mobile network, core network, and APIs and facilities for innovators. So, and that business, was successful. It's still going strong today, and it's now owned by Max Telecom here in the Isle of Man. It's still serving their needs. They're still they're still using it to innovate and create new propositions. But then the sort of step beyond that, for me, the second lap around the park is, rather than trying to layer on top of a core network, build one from scratch. Because layering on top of a core network, it gives a bit of what I call a glass floor. It lets you get so far down into the stack and no further, because you come up against the facilities that the core network vendors have decided to expose and nothing else. So there is definitely a parallel there. Stacuity, again, is about bringing together, the next sort of generation of IT requirements in the world of the hyperscalers and the world of IoT, and finding a ways to meet those needs on the mobile side, but by using a core which has been designed from first principles for that, for that purpose.
Let me follow up with one of those sexy or not so sexy acronyms we see flying around. Network as a service, the potentially the big dream, I don't know if it is a dream, but of softwareization of telecom, which seems, Mike, your people coming together speaking French and German, the IT guy and the network guy potentially being one single person. Are we there yet? And I'd like to ask to both of you, because Tim, you've lived it as an MVNO, and Mike, you lived it with some of the products. Are we really progressing in NAS as a network as a service, or is it just a small incremental step?
I think my view on that, the as a service bit is definitely important. So the second half of that acronym is very, very important, because that is all about making things capital efficient, making things easy to onboard, easy to integrate, everything be ready to go, multi-tenancy. And from our perspective, where we're pitching to, for example, operators, the concept of an adjacent core to meet a different set of requirements than their traditional core, it has to be as a service, because they're not going to buy another core when they've already bought one, but they're quite happy to subscribe to another core to allow them to open up to new segments. So the as a service bit's really important, whether it's network as a service, whether it's platform as a service, whether it's software as a service. I think is a bit more blurry. It doesn't really matter quite so much. The important thing is that being able to open up new revenue lines, recover some margin which has historically been lost quickly and with low capital requirements. That's the important bit as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if you think the same, Tim. That's probably a commercial answer. You should have answered that.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got so my perspective about kind of the industry as a whole is, I suppose, change is always messy, isn't it? So change doesn't happen in a kind of uniform, kind of linear way. And if you think about the origins of the industry, it's a tremendous success story. The kind of these businesses have sprung up, utilizing spectrum, generated revenue for governments, which have paid for hospitals and those services, because of the kind of the standardization across the industry. Those, the relatively simple services, or a simple set of services, voice and SMS, etc., work interoperably all around the world. So huge amount the industry to be really proud of there. But then if you think also about, even, my background, 15, 20 odd years ago, the evolution of the MVNO market, there was a pressure to innovate and a pressure to change. And it was the operators who tended to be 3 or 4 in their market who are under the most pressure for their particular kind of set of circumstances were then probably the most likely to adopt the wholesale model. So that kind of unlocked some change. Think about different markets are regulated in different ways. So change will happen at different speeds at different times, but at a real macro level, the journey towards a more open, democratized ecosystem where it's easier to have control of these resources as a service and build better services because of that. I just think that's a journey we've been on for 20 years and it'll continue for another 20 years. And it's not just about licensed mobile, it's about satellite, it's about LoRa, it's about all of these different technologies that are finding or will find their roles in the ecosystem according to the needs of particular use cases. It's a global network, which, I say the process it's not going to happen overnight, but by finding the right kind of partnerships, I think we all in the industry can start to identify opportunities to innovate sustainably, do something that's not just PR, but something which is really making a valuable contribution. It's sustainable economically, it's scalable. And I think that's how the process of change happens, really.
And talking about change and how to change can happen, you highlighted something that I'd probably like to go back to, how this has been a success. You can describe success in multiple ways, but certainly, and we at MEF like to count data from all the regulators and all the operators. So we counted 1.7 billion M2M or IoT SIM in 2020, and there are 2.9 billion to our last count in 2023. Data available for MEF data for all the different countries. Now, that's a 72% increase. That's fantastic news. But you just mentioned before, the operators have not yet, capitalized on that part of their growth as much. So what's your view here? How should you say, what's a better recipe for a mobile operator? Or who's making money? I mean, who's going to be driving this market?
I think on the cellular side, for cellular IoT connectivity, I mean, the operators are, clearly carrying that traffic. They're hosting those subscribers, but by providing effectively what has become a bit of a dumb pipe. And as a result, their slice of the margin has been reduced because other vendors have entered in order to make up for that dumb pipe by putting things on either end of it or over the top of it. So I think that the reality is that given technically where the operators sit on the journey from device to backend server, they're right in the middle of it. They're exceptionally well placed to provide features and capabilities which are much stronger, much more, much more powerful than those over the top capabilities brought by others. So if they're prepared to think differently and convert their dumb pipe into something smarter. When I say smarter, I mean which gives the control over security, visibility, operational resilience, all these things which are really important to customers. Then they can recover some of that margin because the intelligence needed elsewhere reduces. And in cases where an IoT device, might be in a sensor, a parking sensor in the road, whether using NB-IoT or using or a traditional cellular, where it's quite constrained in terms of its capabilities because it's a small device and battery life's important, then those can still be secured, but secured by the network, and the operators can do that. The operators can do that, if they're prepared to look beyond the dumb pipe. I think they've become a little bit lazy, and they've been caught napping. And as a result, it's all become about price for them. That's how people are choosing, and that means the margins have been squeezed. Then they have to, they have to find a way to be a little bit more creative.
Tim, you come from the mobile operator side, Virgin Mobile, launching important things in Virgin Mobile, like postpaid. Afrimax as well. Now, there is an MVNO flavors in that, I should say. And I probably need to ask, because I've heard a lot about how it's not mobile operators, it's MVNO for IoT now that are driving some of the business. Is it just part of what Mike was saying, kind of waking up and start really focusing on this customer and this opportunity? What do you see the role eventually of a mobile operator there?
I think absolutely is what Mike was talking about, and I think it also goes back to that big picture view I tried to express, which is just a kind of an ongoing evolution of the industry away from these kind of vertically integrated, mobile operator businesses into a much more kind of open and wider dynamic ecosystem where I think increasingly, the smart operators, all operators have still got fundamental power, in the industry with their IMSIs and their spectrum, and and they are still kind of fundamentally kind of the foundation. But I think the evolution of the MVNOs in the consumer market and now in the IoT market, they're just a symptom really of the need to innovate, of the need to kind of do things differently to actually address customer needs. It's very hard for various reasons, I think, for a lot of the operator businesses to do that. And not just technically. I remember, I won't give the name of the operator, but I did work for an operator for a while. And the way that they described their revenues as an annuity stream. So in other words, it was kind of, they would continue in perpetuity as long as they didn't do anything fundamentally wrong or kind of continue to deliver a good customer experience. They could pretty much guarantee that they'd always have those revenues into the future. I kind of get all of that, and I understand it's practically true. I mean, that's kind of the way businesses and consumers do behave, and it enables operators to raise money to build out networks and investment. So there's a lot of, I don't want to be kind of critical of that per se, but at the same time, I do think it's quite arrogant. Because the potential, there's I suppose that actually what I'm trying to say is there's a big missed opportunity, which I kind of saw, again, come back to my personal experience of being inside an operator, trying to find a way of making a bit of change happen that could, enable us to grow in some kind of way or serve a customer need more effectively. I think that happens all the time. There's lots of missed opportunity to innovate and grow. And that's what Mike and I are both passionate about, I think, on a personal level. We get a real kick out of that. And that's what we're trying to do with Stacuity. It's kind of create, open up access to all the good stuff so that people who do want to kind of get more control can, to build something that's better.
Great. We almost are out of time, but I'd still like to ask one more question then, and I have seen in your information as well that Stacuity is also having some geographic interest, growing up in Africa, if I'm not mistaken as well. So the question is, geographies, where is the IoT market right now? Where is it moving? Where is it faster? You don't have a lot of time, but can you give us a bit of a high level?
One thing which is happening geographically, which the industry needs to watch out for, is the sort of reversal of a bit of globalization. I mean, lots of IoT has been around roaming, and there are increasing number of jurisdictions now where now they've seen the criticality of IoT to society. They're bringing in requirements to have equipment in country, and data sovereignty in transit has become important. So I think that that's going to mean that the answers to that question has to change. Latin America, very dynamic market from an IoT perspective, but with some challenges. We're starting to see those just starting to arrive in Europe as well. And I'm sure the same will apply in Asia before now. So for any business that wants to trade globally, it's very important that they have a strategy for how they can respond as those sort of regulatory constraints come in.
And Tim, do you want to add anything?
Well, just quickly, I'll say, yeah, so you shouldn't generalize about Africa as a continent. It must become very varied, individual markets. But so, I mean, again, it's a cliche. It's a mobile-first environment, isn't it? And there's so much going on there that's really interesting in terms of, use cases around solar and utilities and manufacturing and agritech. And also, I think, kind of the role of satellite, is really important. And something that we need to think about moving forward is how we work along, we work in a satellite environment as well. But yeah, so South America, Africa, there's huge potential. You might even look at Europe and the US and say that's where the role of mobile data in digital transformation is already well established. But that's where the customers are now coming to the operators or their MVNOs with more demanding requirements around security, for example, more sophistication, and that also presents opportunity. And you're talking there maybe about gigabytes or tens of gigabytes of data a month, not a few kilobytes on a small tracker that's traveling around the world. So it's enormous, the opportunity. The challenge is to find the areas where you can add the biggest value, I think.
Here we are. Well, thank you. I think that's probably is our 30 minutes for today. But 30 minutes talking about mobile IoT, I think we're giving a very good high-level view. There's so much more of it. We'll come back and ask. But for now, I'll give a big thank you to Mike Bromwich, the CEO and founder of Stacuity, and Tim Dowling, the CCO and co-founder of Stacuity. Thanks again for being here with us.
Thank you, Dario.
And
thank you.
Thank you, Dario.
We'll continue our chat soon. Thank you.
Great to spend time with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Perspectives in Mobile. Join us next as we explore telecoms, technology, and mobile innovations. Stay tuned, stay connected, and let's unlock the mobile potential together.